community standards stated that users could not advocate extreme violence or post death threats, quote, unless the target is an organization or individual covered in the dangerous individuals and organizations policy. What's that? Well, Facebook's dangerous individuals and organizations list is simply a list of people and groups Facebook doesn't like. Alex Jones, InfoWars are on that list. So is Louis Farrakhan. So is Milo Yiannopoulos and others whose only crime is the views they hold that Facebook doesn't like. Want them murdered? Well, Facebook said that was fine. We contacted Facebook about this policy yesterday. They replied by telling us they had changed their policy and provided this statement to us. Quote, we don't allow credible threats of violence against anyone. Our intent was to cover things like calls for the death penalty or support for military action against violent actors. We've updated our community standards to be more clear about that. Thank you, Facebook. We're happy about that. Happy that Facebook is no longer tolerating violent threats against political dissidents. Of course, they're still silencing them. Well, one group they aren't silencing, though, is Antifa. Al-Qaeda and ISIS may get more headlines, but in America, Antifa has become the terror group that poses a much greater threat to your rights than maybe any other in the country. Journalist Andy Ngo learned that the hard way last month when they nearly killed him as he attempted to cover Antifa protests in Portland. Watch. Yo! So these days, it usually isn't the government that blocks your ability to speak or to assemble freely. Instead, Antifa gangs harass you in public while big tech silences you online. Now, a new legal fund aims to combat both of these threats to your liberties. Harmeet Dhillon is an actual civil rights attorney and the founder of PubliusLex.com. She joins us tonight. Harmeet, great to see you.
Thanks,
Tell
Tucker.
us the purpose, the aim of the group that you just started.
Well, Tucker, I've been a civil rights attorney for most of my career, over 25 years, and I saw a real gap in the civil rights establishment, which is that when it comes to increasingly First Amendment rights in general, but particularly the rights of anybody who's anywhere on the right or anybody who's marginalized and not part of the popular woke movement, there's no place for them in the civil rights community. And so I started this nonprofit last year. It was approved by the IRS for nonprofit status earlier this year. And we aim to fill the gaps that the civil rights community doesn't fill. Like the ACLU no longer cares about First Amendment issues, certainly not for people on my side of the spectrum. But this is not a partisan organization. It's simply there to help people who are ignored. So Andy Ngo is the first client of Publius Lex. We have also hoping to help people who are being marginalized by big tech and oppressed by the government. And so, you know, I've sued the city of San Jose, I've sued Google. We're looking at legal action in Portland. And so all of these things are things that are dear to my heart. And hopefully there'll be many attorneys joining me to help take these cases.
I assume you expect to be censored by big tech in your efforts to protect consumers against big tech.
Oh, I'm sure I already am. You know, tweets that should have thousands of likes have hundreds, et cetera. I think this is a common issue. It's something that we talked about at the White House today, actually.
How'd that meeting go?
It was very interesting. There were a lot of people from across the sort of Twitterverse, different walks of life and so forth, but what they had in common was a passion for free speech and making sure that their voices are heard. And so we had some great conversations privately and also with the bigger group about what was happening, and some great members of Congress. We talked about potential legislative analyses. Ultimately, I'm very skeptical of anything that doesn't really impact what they're doing with respect to the immunity that they have from lawsuits under Communications Decency Act Section 230. And so I think that, to me, as an attorney, I think the first thing that needs to get done is to rein in those definitions and make sure that only the speech that was meant to be protected when the statute was passed is what is protected now. It's really gotten out of control, Tucker. The courthouse doors are virtually barred to anybody who wants to sue for their rights, even if it's a breach of contract, antitrust issues, anything like that. You know, big tech has got its finger on the scale, and they own a lot of politicians and a lot of think tanks in D.C. And so it's an epic struggle. Even the antitrust think tank takes money. It takes money from the big tech trusts, which really tells you everything about the depth of the corruption. Harmeet Dhillon, you're one of the very few people standing in opposition to the totalitarian impulses of big tech, and we're grateful for that. Good luck with this. Thank you, Tucker.